break. I am pleased to be joined on stage now by three individuals here, one of whom you will recognize immediately from just before break. Ryan Ross, who's very kindly come back to the stage and joined us as part of our expert speaker panel. With myself and Ryan, we are also joined by Dr. Alia at the far side there. Welcome, Dr. Alia. She is the VP of People Learning and Growth at Do. Before joining Do in 2007, she was the senior psychologist at Emirates Airline. Holds a PhD in psychology from the University of Leeds in the UK, Masters of Science from the University of Stirling in Scotland, and postgraduate diploma from the University of Barcelona in Spain. Welcome and thank you for joining us here today. The final member of our panel is Delel Chaabouni. Delel has been the Chief Information Officer of PepsiCo for the MENA region, leading the company digital transformation agenda. She has 2 decades of experience working with organizations such as Hewlett-Packard, KPMG, Dubai World Trade Center. She's an active advocate for women in STEM careers, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. She created the first million woman mentor chapter in Riyadh in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and is a member of the Emirates Government Foundation Think Science Program Advisory Committee, empowering the youth of the UAE to embrace a future of science. So thank you very much to our 3 panelists for joining us here today. We are going to be looking at 5 to 6 questions around the areas of talent that we're going to ask the expert individuals to provide their views on. And after each question, I'm going to be offering up questions to the room so that we can engage in some debate. I ask that when I ask you for your questions that you just engage them towards the panel member that you would like to address initially. Thank you. So the first question that I'm going to open up to our expert panel is, what is your definition of talent? What events or experience helped you personally to develop and grow to be able to become a panelist at a talent conference? Let's see who's got the high recognition and goes first.
Well, I'll take that leap of faith and talk about it. I think Ryan said, or Dr. Hogan was talking about talent and different definitions, and you did, I think, Andrew, at the beginning. So I think companies define it differently, right? Some people just focus more on the top talent when they define talent per se. Others talk about talent as the whole workforce. So there, I think talent is, your employees in general. But I think when you talk about talent development programs and some budgets that you have to assign to your talent development, this is where you need to differentiate then your talent and segment your talent based on your needs. So that's in a nutshell my own definition. But I think the events or experience that helped me personally, I'm an advocate of Hogan. I drive IT in my organization, but I've been a Hogan certified coach for many years now. I coach a lot within PepsiCo executives on Hogan, and we combine it with 360-degree feedbacks to get the maximum out of that information. And if you look at my Hogan and my personality, you will see that I'm actually in sociability, I'm probably in the middle, which means that I enjoy one-to-one interactions, but in my comfort zone, actually, I'm not a public speaker, and I don't like being in the crowd. But you see me here on a panel, and I've put a target of, on speaking in conferences, at least 4 conferences a year. So what I have done is I've gone to Toastmasters, which is known for improving your public skills, and I love putting myself outside of my comfort zone. So that's how I've been, as a panel here talking, and given the passion that I have for talent development, this is how you find me here. Anyone would like to add?
So, I think my definition of talent is very similar to what has been discussed earlier. It's talent in general. I think we're all talented in our own ways, and how we contribute to an organization or to a cause we can be talented in a specific area or specific role. So for organizations, I think it's for them to understand what they are looking for in individuals that will take their organization to the next level, and that's talent. It could be from personal hobbies, it could be from specific attitudes, ambitions, skills. That is talent. What events or experience helped me to personally develop and grow, and why am I here today? I think I'm one of those people who also may have started my education in a specific field of psychology, specifically in clinical. And over the years, I sort of stumbled into organizational psych many years ago, and that's where I found the passion. It was about looking at individuals who have the talent, who make a difference, and finding the right person for the right role. So during my time in Emirates, I think that sort of made me understand why it's very important to screen people out, perhaps, and find the best talent, and help individuals realize their ambitions and their skills as well. So I think it's seeing how my own skills, I had to be flexible as well over the past couple of years to start looking at what matters, looking at skills that I could take into other areas of the business. So I did this stint in recruitment, a short time I was with the business partners. So I've understood more about what HR is about and how I can nurture individuals through my current role. Thanks.
I think what I would add to the definition of talent is having the right people in the right roles at the right times. And that is talent, and I'll sound like a broken record, but if you have people skills, learning skills, and work ethic, being able to really grow and develop those individuals into what they can become versus what they are when they walk into your organization is key to the talent process. And then also recognizing that not everyone is meant to be in a key talent role. And so for me, it's also recognizing that there's different types of talent. Some people have a talent for leadership. Some people have a talent for leading processes or leading other aspects of the business. And that's one of the things that a lot of our clients are starting to focus on. Getting outside of just thinking to be a key talent in the organization means you have to have people leadership responsibilities. So really focusing on the career path. For me personally, and I would say this even if he wasn't sitting in the room, but 21 years of direct feedback from Bob Hogan has helped me develop. And you would think you might say, 21 years later, you're not getting direct feedback. Oh, yes, I am. But it is. It's strategic self-awareness. It's paying attention to what other people say to you in terms of how you are interpreted, how they view your actions, and especially those of your team and your staff. And so that constant feedback, not only from individuals that you trust and respect, but then also from individuals that are willing just to invest time in you, is really what's, for me personally, been key to being able to sit here and be able to do what I do within the field.
Thank you, everybody. At that point, I'm going to ask what questions the room might have to address any of the comments that our three panelists have made there.
Hi, I'm Abhishek from Dubai Islamic Bank. A very simple question around talent and also around the feedbacks, right? I mean, we look at feedbacks across our organization, with the peers, with the superiors, with our subordinates. Sometimes these feedbacks are quite subjective. So if I ask somebody that it's how good I am in, say, delegation, and it's like, I'm giving somebody who is a color blind to assess and give him a color to choose, say red color, and to tell him whether it's red or what other color, right? So all the color blind, 7, 8 of them will say it's a shade of gray, right? So feedback is something about, and also around all these subjective areas where these people are not adept and they don't know the definition around, bringing the objectivity around these feedbacks, how we can bring it. I mean, how we should look at it.
I guess I'll start just by saying I think anytime you give somebody feedback, it has to be crystal clear in terms of what definition you're using to give feedback. So if it's around being adaptable, what do you specifically mean? It can't be vague. It can't be a generality. Unfortunately, for most organizations, it can't be a competency that has just been espoused. It has to be very behavioral, very measurable, and you should be able then to also illustrate other data points. So around adaptability, here are the 3 times in the last meeting or 3 hours or whatever it may be where your adaptability was shown either to be inflexible or flexible, and here's the consequences. So I think making it very behavioral, very focused on how it impacts the team if you're talking about a leader, but most of all, it has to be defined very clearly and it has to be measurable.
I think it's important that when we say feedback, we, as in the talent space, we educate people and we explain to them what does feedback look like. It's not about being subjective, it's about being objective and getting the right information across. And I think it's part of building a culture in any organization. It's very easy to say we need feedback, but how do we educate people on how to give feedback? I think that's the crucial point. And it's creating that awareness. So if someone is asking for feedback, it needs to be done in a space as well that is safe, that is neutral, and it'll get them to actually do something and develop themselves. So I think it's all about understanding what do we really mean by feedback in the first place.
So if I had to add to that, I think we had very good inputs on the individual feedbacks, but there are also the feedback systems that we have in the organization. So for instance, in PepsiCo, we use 360-degree feedbacks based on competencies, so leadership competencies. And I think because you're asking many people, first of all, you need to identify the people that you're working with. So who are you sending this feedback to? And we have the line management, which actually looks at adding or removing depending on whether they think these people are relevant. But most importantly, I think when you go into the general feedbacks like the 360 is to look at the trends. So these are the most, I would say, helpful ones. It's not about a particular person per se, but if there is a trend on a certain behavior, then this is where we need then to look at personality with it combined. Hogan, is it coming from the personality perspective? And what do we do with it? Obviously, people can give comments as well, which can be very helpful, but sometimes they don't, and people hide behind the rating that they give. But most importantly, I would say the trends are the ones that matter most. Yeah.
Thank you for your input. Thank you.
A few more questions. Excellent.
Hi, my name's Karen Oliver. A question for the group. What recommendations can you share with an organization with a limited budget to develop talent?
Sorry, could you repeat the question again?
I'm thinking about some of the organizations that we are talking to now that have a challenge with budget constraints, but still need to and want to develop talent. So any recommendations that you could share for an organization that wants to continue to develop talent in a difficult market? I'm also thinking, this is probably 2 questions. What are the trends that you're seeing for talent development?
I'll answer the first part of the question. It is a very challenging market nowadays. Many organizations do face budget restraints. Now, anyone working in the talent space will see that their budget has been probably greatly reduced when it comes to probably either identifying talent or developing talent. And I think it's all a judgment call. It's to be able to, first of all, ensure that you have the engagement and the buy-in from your seniors, making sure you have the support from your leaders, creating that awareness on why talent is important, and then also ensuring that you have the right tools to measure the talent. So it's not about having the luxury that you will have, I don't know, various assessments. It's making sure you have the right one that's worth the investment, and it will take you in the next 2 years that you can use the same results in the future. That's one element. When it comes to developing, I think it's very important to understand what are the skills, or what is the future what are you developing for, basically, or what is the talent you need for the future, and then trying to leverage your internal resources, which doesn't require much of a budget, and at times doesn't require any budget. You will find people who are willing to become coaches, internal mentors, willing to share their own knowledge and expertise. So there are ways that you can leverage, and through identifying the talent, if there are gaps that have been identified, what are the best programs that you can send these individuals to? Is it more about formal learning, or is it experiential learning? So I think if one has clarity from the beginning, then you're able to make the right choices when it comes to budget constraints. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I think I agree with Dr. Alia. I think it needs to be sustainable, right? I know that when times are tough, these are the first budgets to be slashed. So the key is to have the systems in place, but also to look at ways of making it sustainable. So definitely internal. There are so many passionate people in the functions. I mean, I'm one of them. I do a lot of coaching internally beyond my IT role, and there are many others who are. So make sure that you certify them, that they have the knowledge, because people really appreciate the one-on-one coaching. It's so, I mean, when you see after the coaching sessions how people are happy that you're helping them in the self-awareness journey, in their career paths, and so on. The second thing, in terms of training, I mean, today with the digital world, online universities, subscriptions to apps which deliver certain skills are out there, and they are not expensive. So make use of them as well. So I think you can do a lot even with restricted budgets.
I think the three trends that we've seen, to answer your second question, one is being asked, OD and talent departments are being asked to do a lot more with less. And so for them, it's about streamlining and trying to make the language as simple as possible, versus having to have an MD to read some sort of output or data point on an individual. Second, it's focused on the future. And so really helping people understand what is it that I need, not today, but I need a year from now or 2 years from now, especially as rapidly as organizations are having to deploy talent in different situations. The third trend that we're starting to see a lot of is group-based learning and development. And so there is the individual coach that typically is more of a remote type experience versus the traditional face-to-face. I won't say one way or the other if that's better or worse. I do think you lose some of the fidelity of the face-to-face interaction, but the group-based or the cohort-based development initiatives are gaining popularity, again, being able to do more touch with less budget. But overall, all these things are focused on, as Dr. Hogan was talking about, the effectiveness. And so looking for people that are the hidden gems in the organization that our traditional methods aren't identifying.
Thank you very much.
Hello, this is Faisal Maskari from Ajial, Oman. We're assisting a lot of our clients in terms of identifying talent. But the challenge is, what do you do with this talent? There's limited positions at the top. And the other challenge is once you've identified this talent, is you risk losing them because they're already identified as talent and they feel that they have a lot more opportunities. If they don't have an opportunity in-house, then they will move out of the organization.
So I'll just say a few words and then I'll let my fellow panelists chime in. For us, what we've seen, our belief is, yes, if you have a talent program, you need to let those know they've been identified as key talent. Typically, those high performers, if you will, or high potentials, if they're not identified, they become disenchanted and leave anyway. Two, it's all about career pathing. And we do a lot of work with Cisco in the States, and we've presented at conferences on their career pathing. And being able to provide an individual that has a PhD in mathematics from name the school, an idea of how do they progress in the organization, but perhaps not as a people leader, helps with retention. They had a technical development program where they would lose 70% of their high potentials every year out of this program. They didn't lose them because they didn't have career opportunities. They lost them because they promoted them into management of people instead of managers of process, of innovation, of ideas, etc. And so I think part of the talent pipeline problem is we still equate growing in an organization with gathering boxes underneath our name. And I just think the generation that we see today is beyond it all having to do with people management.
Yeah, I would agree with this. You raised an important question. What if you develop talent and they leave? For us in EITC, it's not something that we want to lose our people, but we always look at it as an investment for the country as well. So if our UAE nationals leave, it's okay because they'll be serving another entity. Then also we can't have just talented people that we leave them because rightly said, they will get disengaged as well because they are not getting nurtured in the right way possible. It is a challenge, and I think it's something that all organizations need to face to the reality that whether you don't invest in the talented, you will lose them, and if you do invest, you will lose them. If you don't invest, you lose them. So you might as well invest, and you know that you'll be able to at least have career paths for a certain few of them. Rightly said as well, not everyone can be a leader, or there are no leadership positions for everyone. So I think it goes back to the career banding as well, trying to educate the younger generation. That's about lateral moves. It's about ensuring people grow across, and it's not just necessarily horizontal growth, vertical growths anymore. So I think that's another awareness that needs to happen with the younger generations.
Yeah, I think to add to that, we are seeing a lot from the younger generation who think, they've done something for 6 months, they can now move to the next role. There is a lot of, I think in the new generations, what we see is, they are very unsettled. They want to move very quickly, and they forget that learning is extremely important at the beginning, getting experiences as much as possible. So in PepsiCo, we put a lot of emphasis on building critical experiences. And building critical experiences meaning you might actually do a role just for 6 months and then you come back to your role, but you add to your portfolio of skills. As a matter of fact, you cannot grow vertically unless you go horizontally and try the different areas. So you cannot be a head of IT if you haven't done the different areas of IT before, even for a certain short time. You don't need to be an expert to be a leader, but at least to understand what it is. And I think Dr. Hogan was talking about people understanding the shop floor and what's happening there. So it's extremely important that you build these critical experiences, and I think it's important to tell the talent. I think my second point is I would take the analogy of, when you build a talent management program, I'll take the analogy of surveys. So when you do a survey, many people are actually getting stuck on questions. And what is the question that I'm going to ask for the survey? But ultimately, the question to ask is, what am I going to do with the data that I'm getting after? Because, a survey for the survey of the sake of survey is not making sense. In fact, when I get a survey with 30 questions, it doesn't make any sense. So it's really knowing what is the data that you're going to get and what are you going to do with it. And similarly to talent management programs is ultimately what are you trying to achieve? So do you have key roles that you want to keep, the leadership pipeline that you want to build, and then accordingly build the talent management programs. Yeah.
Thank you. Two more people that still want to ask a question. We'll finish with those questions and then we'll move on to the next one. Yes, so Khaled just behind if you want to go first, and then we'll come here.
So my name is Khaled. I work in the pharmaceutical industry. So my question mainly for Dr. Alia, but for the rest of the panel, if you want to share your experience as well. So when it comes to the interviewing process, we know that there are many people, many candidates, that they are very professional, and you understand very well how to answer the questions. And then in reality, you find it completely different, especially in the attitude and behaviors part. So how can you make sure that what the person is saying, even if you ask to reflect certain competencies by examples, they make up examples and you don't know if it's true or not, especially if you don't have a reference of this person to ask in his previous job. So what kind of questions, how you deal with this?
I think for me, it's all about psychometrics at the end of the day, personality assessments. So, for example, for executives, we have the Hogan, which is a brilliant tool when it comes to looking at the derailers, etc. So I think if there is a good feedback session and understanding the results from the assessment, it will help support the interview as well. So you're able to make a better judgment when you're asking around the competencies, because you've already looked at the different derailers and you can get solid examples around it. So for me, it's all about assessments at the end of the day. I'm a strong advocate of psychometrics, so I don't believe you can only interview. One cannot go with the other. You need assessments, psychometrics with interviews. Otherwise, the process is broken. And your results, it's from a person who uses them a lot, the psychometrics, a lot of information you can get out, and you'll be able to understand the behaviors of the individual in front of you when you're interviewing.
And then last question before we move on.
Hello, my name is Salih Al-Karbi, National Petroleum Construction Company, Abu Dhabi. I would like just to, maybe if you can touch on how to link the corporate objectives with the learning and development and talent in the organization.
I'll start. I'll answer this one. I think most of our corporate objectives will be around, for some of them will be around generating revenue, growing in certain areas, growing in certain markets. Now, if you look at how the market and organizations are changing, well, whoever you hire in 1 year, within 6 months, their knowledge becomes obsolete. So it's very important to make sure that you understand the trends of the future, to be able to bring your workforce as well with you, to be able to see what they need to deliver in the future trends. So for example, 5 years ago, the concept of IoT, Internet of Things, may not have existed. But I have very good people who are in the technical stream, qualified, with the good attitude, people that you really want to invest. And you see them being part of the organization. So you need to upskill them with the certain knowledge and the certain trends that's happening at the moment in the markets, and making sure that that your workforce comes with you. I mean, for us in telco, we're talking now about robotics, artificial intelligence. Anyone who graduated 10 years ago didn't have they may have had the basic knowledge. Now, interestingly and widely said, you've got a lot of digital learning platforms, you've got a lot of content, and if you use them right, the social media and the right, with the right intentions, you will get a lot of information. So for example, on Twitter, you can follow whoever you want and you will get a lot of knowledge and a lot of information from across the world. So I think it's important to identify or to understand what are the gaps that you currently face, at least for the next year. I will not say the next 2 to 3 years, because it's almost impossible to predict, but at least create that awareness. And as long as you have an agile workforce, and a workforce that is open, a workforce that is humble, you'll be able to do a lot with them. So I think that's important, at least for us.
Thanks, Dr. Ali. Move on to the next question. I think some of these questions are starting to broach in towards some of the next questions that are coming on, so we'll just hold that together, and we'll move on to the next question, all linked with relevance, so we should be able to ask them if we're cutting you off there. Next question to move on to, can talent be managed? Now, I think there's quite a famous quote that's going around social media. I think it's attributed to Steve Jobs, but do correct me if I'm wrong. It goes along the lines of, why would you go about hiring intelligent and talented people and then start telling them exactly what to do. So what are the risks of providing too much of a structured approach to talent in organizations? So we've touched a little bit on budget, etc., but this moves more around those talented high flyers. Can they be contained? Do you want to contain them? Do you want to let them fly? What are your views on this?
I think, look, my point of view is you need the governance in place in terms of, talent management programs, competencies that you need and so on. But obviously, talent needs direction. So, they need to have objectives. They need to know what's the vision of the company and so on. You need to motivate them to, to deliver towards that objective. You need to equip them with the right tools. And obviously, we talked a lot about learnability and them being able to learn quickly. But I think if you give too much guidance, you are killing, and we talked about, being able to allow failures. If you want innovation in your business, then you shouldn't tell them how to do things, because you're killing innovation at its inception, and they're going to leave you eventually. So it's definitely what are you, where are you heading? You hired them for their skills and their, I would say, not necessarily only hard skills, but their agility and their learnability. You give them the tools, you motivate them, and then you let them bring the new ideas to you. That's why you want them ultimately in your organization.
I would completely agree with you. You ask any product innovation company in the world, did they get it right the first time? And the answer is no. And I think that's because they've allowed their talent to do just what we want, and that is to be creative. They have to provide a culture that is risk tolerant. We've all used sticky notes in our lives, in our businesses, at home, whatever it may be. That was a mistake of 3M engineers. They were messing around with the glue for another project, and they realized, wow, I can actually peel this off and put it back on, and peel it off, and now everybody uses sticky notes. Same thing with Gatorade.
Yes.
It was a mistake at the University of Florida, hence why it's called Gatorade. But again, it's that creativity that you can tactfully manage, but too much constraint, and people start to ask, well, why am I even here? Why don't you just tell me what to do? And that's when you start to lose those key innovators.
Sure. And I think as well, it depends, the keyword, can talent be managed? Unfortunately or unfortunately, most of the senior management tend to be older, and there's a generation gap between the young talent that we're bringing in. So I think it's as well the making a distinction between telling and asking. And I think it's a different generation of what it was about the past and what the younger generations want as well. So it's a distinction between your millennials and your older group. And I think that's where we need to educate the management, that it's how they approach certain situations, how they ask certain situations, how they frame certain problems, so that the talent will be able to work around it within a frame, but still keeping it quite broad.
Thank you. Kind of leads us to our next question, but we will just open the room very briefly. If you have a question specifically on that, I can see Raju at the front there.
Rajuvir from STC. I'm a senior leadership coach, and my interest is in measurement of management per se of talent. Since all the three of you have very strong assessment background, have you used assessment of assessment over a period of time? Say, for example, if you were to have structured development of people and you were to do a prior Hogan assessment and a post-Hogan assessment, would it change, or should it change, or should it not change? And what's your view on measuring that?
From the assessment perspective, no. You should not see broad changes in their actual assessment profile. What you should see is changes in a 360 or a 180 or the performance evaluation if your development programs are effective. And that's how a lot of our key clients measure success. It's on, and it could be a 1 or 2 point shift across different dimensions on a 360. That is success. That means people are doing things differently. But your core personality profiles are not going to change substantially over time.
Yeah, I agree with this point. I don't think personality changes, but it's the behaviors that get demonstrated. So whenever we look at development or coaching, it's getting the understanding either through a 360 or feedback from the relevant stakeholders on how they see the person progressing. Generally, I would recommend keeping it through 6-7 months to do a pre and post questionnaire, you could say. But we don't assess individual, we don't repeat the psychometrics of the individual unless a larger amount of time has passed.
Thank you. Well, going back to the point that Dr. Alia mentioned just previously takes us to our next question around how can baby boomer and Generation X leaders provide an engaging and meaningful working environment for the millennials and indeed the Gen Z, iGen, or centennials born roughly from 1996. We had a third industrial sort of revolution, but we have very quickly bounced into a fourth one, which the millennials are engaged with, whereas maybe the baby boomers and Generation X are still coming through on that. There's a disconnect that manifests itself in many different ways. How can we help link that senior management bringing through the next generation? It's always been an issue, but there's quite a pronounced element in terms of the technology advancement that's happened recently.
I think, what we started to do is building. There are definitely certain competencies, for at least from a PepsiCo perspective, we are looking at adding certain competencies. So digital competencies are definitely extremely important, and Dr. Alia talked about it, is how do we bring the older generation into building more awareness on digital and bringing their skills up to speed, and there are many other things that we can do similarly as well. We looked at as well the new generations and the kind of workplaces and the kind of flexibility, what's flexibility for them. So you no longer talk about 8 to 5 workplaces, but you work about, having the flexibility to work from anywhere. Again, if you come back to objectives, it's really about how do you deliver on that objective versus how do you do it. So times and so on become actually irrelevant. So if you give that flexibility and making everyone understand that that's okay, because the older generation doesn't accept it that much. They are not used to it. Having the right workplace in terms of the open spaces. I mean, we find that older generations also struggle with that, used to their own offices and so on. So you need to It's more of building awareness of the older generation, because the longer you stay, it becomes harder for you to adapt. I think the younger generations adapt much faster. And we started as well a concept which works very well in the company. I mean, we started certain pilots, is reverse mentoring. So we are having millennials and Gen Z and so on mentoring the senior management, actually, not only about digital, but how they think and where they see the world. And in India, for instance, we've done a very good pilot with PepsiCo where we have built the executive team with these, and we gave them certain topics to lead, and they report to the leadership team. So I think these kind of things bring the generations together. But from what I have seen, we are not doing enough. I think there is a lot more to do.
I think what we've seen in our work is from an assessment perspective, you don't see a lot of differences in terms of everyday characteristics or profiles between these different generations. What you see is more of the on-demand and I want it now mentality or expectation, I should say, of the Gen Z or the I generation or whatever we want to call them. And I always say it's the generation me. I want it my way, customized, almost like being at Burger King or McDonald's. It's what they need when they need it. And it is. It's about the adaptability and flexibility of those that are in those senior roles, realizing this isn't someone being lazy, this isn't someone being careless. It's just their whole lives they've grown up with asking Google or whomever it may be.
YouTube, actually, more
literally. and having
Or
that,
Alexia.
or Alexia, yeah.
Oh, Alex.
And having that information on demand. And so now what we even hear in our business is, what do you mean I have to wait? What do you mean I have to ask multiple questions? I can't just have it all in front of me. I think that's something that we just have to be cognizant of in terms of the environment we start to create.
I agree with this. I think it's, again, we don't do enough yet on that. It's creating awareness. We're working towards it. And rightly said, it's about the older generation will see the Generation Z as being impatient. They want things done immediately. They want things done now. They want to see results. But that's what we've created for the younger generation. So it's about managing those expectations both ways. It'll take time, I think. But it's, I guess, work in progress. Just.
Do you think it's possible? Is this a scenario which might not have a solution?
Well, I think it all depends on,
it
it goes back to basic personality traits, on how open any generation are. So your baby boomers or your Generation X, if they're open to embracing new ways of doing things, you will be able to find the midpoint between all the generations. But if, like, anyone in any generation could be stubborn, set in their ways, then obviously there will be resistance. So I think in any organization, as long as you can identify who are your outliers and how you can bring them with you, or even when you're recruiting individuals, to make sure you're recruiting individuals with an open mindset who have that element of flexibility, may make things easier.
I also think it's the responsibility of the older generation to teach some of the millennials some manners. And actually tell them no. And that's one of the things that we hear from a lot of our sophisticated clients, is we spend more time reteaching this millennial generation what they think that is right, that's really wrong. And it opens their eyes, and they realize it's not about on demand. And there are some things that you need to slow down and take time with. And I think for the businesses to continue to be successful regardless, some of what they consider to be old-fashioned values and virtues need to be instilled.
True.
Are you seeing any differences in the demographics with Hogan or Hogan norms, average scores for people of a certain age below or above, or are you seeing a consistency in the personality scores?
We're really not. We've done several recent pieces of research on the topic, and what you'll see is some slight shifts in values around things like affiliation, things like science. I'm speaking Hogan language, I know, but around the social circles that you run in, and is that digital or is it real, or what I call real? And then also on the acquisition and use of data and technology, you see some slight differences there, but in terms of general personality-based characteristics as well as potential derailers, no, you don't see generational differences.
Fascinating. Any comments from the room? Anyone want to direct any specific questions to any of the panelists?
Right. My name is Maitreya. I work in Dubai Islamic Bank. There was a movie that I saw recently. It's called The Intern, Robert De Niro. And he joins as a 70-year-old intern into a company run by Gen Z types. And he was an assistant to the CEO, who's young, in her 20s-something, who took the company from zero to zillions in a couple of years. And she had to be taught manners, as you said, you know. So it's not all one way, but I guess generations can benefit from each other's experiences, you know.
Thanks, man. Anybody else? Okay, well, move on to the next question. How well do performance management or appraisal systems reflect the need for talent identification and development? Is there a risk of bias in the systems which organizations operate?
I'll take the question first. So I don't think personally that performance management or appraisal systems reflect on talent identification, at least how performance can be performance management is set. It's looking at objectives, whether the objectives have been met. You will have an interim review or a quarterly review on those objectives, but it's about the end result. It's not how people get to those results. It doesn't look at the behaviors that will get individuals. So if we look at it purely from a performance management, I don't think it identifies talent. You need something else that will encompass the individual themselves. It's not just what they deliver or the tasks that they deliver. And I think there needs to be a shift in around how performance gets measured. I think performance, it's looking back at, 50, 40 years ago when you were looking at certain tasks, certain outputs. Now it's more about the abstract that we don't see that needs to be quantified. So in my opinion, no, current systems are not looking at talent. Is there a bias? Definitely, because it's who shouts louder will be perceived as a better deliverable of the task or objective, but not necessarily looking at the humbleness. So if you look at humility, for example, it will not be reflected within performance management.
I would echo that predominantly we see performance management systems that simply check the box. It's simply, did you get the job done or not? The great saying, the right results, but the right way. And I think we need to spend more time focusing on the way people are doing the work and the way they're interacting with their colleagues or with their customers, whatever it may be, and really focus our efforts there. And then just as Dr. Hogan was saying this morning, charisma historically has gotten the box checked for you, but that's not what is going to allow you to be successful in the future, given the 5 things that he outlined in terms of what people are looking for in a leader.
Yeah, I would agree that probably performance management today is used to check the box and just to see whether the objectives are being met or not. But I think there is a potential to actually dig more gold from it. If I take the example in PepsiCo, for instance, in our performance management, we have a section on delivering business plan and driving future growth. And as part of it is developing others and developing self and what you do to build more engagement within the organization. And I think if we wanted to evaluate certain talent for different roles, we could actually dig some of those gold, I would say, jewelries from these pieces, but we are not doing it.
So if performance management or appraisal systems are just ticking the box, why do they remain so popular and prevalent and central to decision making at senior level? Or is that changing, do you think, or hope?
I'll take the part of why they're there, and then I'll let my colleagues talk about the senior level. I think they're there for rewards and punishment. I mean, it's how do you track and be able to justify whether it be exiting someone or providing them with some additional compensation or responsibility if you can't show it on a piece of paper that the box has been ticked. And so it's about equity and organizational fairness. The problem is, from my perspective, those performance management tools oftentimes are not fair to begin with.
And some companies are getting rid of them, to be honest. I think some companies are keeping them just to make sure that there is a feedback system in place. If managers were giving feedback as they should be, maybe we wouldn't need them. If the objectives and the direction has been clearly stated and everyone knows what he or she is working towards, then maybe we don't need performance management systems.
Any questions from the room?
My name is Munira. Talking about the performance management systems, they usually are based on absolute values, whereas learning is an incremental process. So is there a way that the performance management system is replaced with a system, or some system is added on which can measure that, your performance relative to what you were? Because that's not how performance management systems I see working. Whereas learning, you need to continue to evaluate over time that, okay, you were this and now you're this.
I think there should be ways to track that over time. Again, personal experience, organizations are changing their performance management process so frequently, and then their competencies change so frequently. How do we expect people to even think about how have I developed, how have I met these performance goals when the rules of the game are constantly changing? I think that just speaks to the inherent disconnect between true performance or performance management and true effectiveness.
Question at the back there.
Just an addition, yeah, my name is Rhea. There are some systems now that you can use in order to support the internal performance management, whereas you'll be able to monitor how you have performed in the past, and then you can monitor every 6 months or every year. And then it would be more valuable if you do one-to-one feedback session with your line manager, for instance. Why have you rated me this such? And then afterwards, you'll be giving him your rating, and what you can do is follow through. What are my strengths at the moment, and what are the development areas? Have I closed some gaps? So there are some systems that you can use on that now. Okay.
I think it's not just about systems, it's about how open or how confident line managers are in giving feedback. Sometimes it's very hard to give negative feedback, so it's very easy to rate everyone on target without addressing issues. And I think that's an issue that I don't want to generalize, but I assume it happens a lot in this part of the world. It's all about trying to be maintaining the status quo. So I think that's one of the flaws that we see in performance management. So no matter how good systems are, if individuals or line managers are not comfortable in addressing certain issues or giving feedback, then it's really nice on paper, on target, you met what you needed to achieve, and they move on, but without addressing the fundamental issues. So probably it's a double-edged sword here.
Hello. Can I make a quick comment on that? We did a major project on giving constructive feedback. So we put, for a very large organization, the middle and top management went through this program. It was just a day's program. And what we found out at the end of this is that most people were promoted because of their technical skills, and they were extremely poor in terms of people skills, and especially when it comes to giving constructive feedback.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Next question. How well do the UAE perform in talent terms in the global or MENA environment? And what more can be done to develop their potential? Is there a role for employers in this?
I think in the UAE, we do have a lot of talented individuals, and I think we're privileged because we have, I don't know, over 150 nationalities, so there's a lot of talent to tap into, whether it's the Emirati population or the expatriate population. I think organizations need to be wise in how they balance, how they attract the right talent for the right roles, and ensuring that they nurture that talent, whether it's Emirati talent or expatriate talent. I'm not sure how well, because I don't have statistics around it, but interacting with other parts of the world or interacting with individuals who come to the UAE, I'm always very proud when they say, oh, there's a lot of talented people here. I think that's a bonus that we have. Is there a role for employers in developing potential talent? Definitely. And I think more needs to be done. Sometimes the assumption is we hire talent and we leave them, but it's important to take them to the next level as well and to identify the potential in being able to nurture. And it goes back to the question of talent for what? Are we looking at future leaders? Are we looking at subject matter experts? What do we want to nurture our talent in? And sometimes this question doesn't get asked, I think.
I don't think it's different from any other, talent is everywhere, as Dr. Alia said. So specifically, maybe, I mean, if I look at my role in helping youth to accept more STEM careers, because I'm helping on that side, what we started doing as well is making sure that they get first experiences during their studies into the industry. Which is important for them to try to understand what are they going to do with their STEM studies later on, and what does it mean, how can it translate. But it's more of not necessarily the person per se, UAE person, but it's really how do you bring the education and the industry together at early stages for them to build more awareness, particularly that, for instance, in STEM and the UAE is still very low when the government is trying to drive more in terms of digitization and so on. But I think in terms of talent, I don't think it's different than any other nationalities. That's my point of view.
We do have a little bit of Hogan data on the difference with GCC, but heavily UAE based. Compared to the global norm for inquisitive, the score here is much higher. Almost 10 percentile points. Something we've been speaking. And when you arrive here, when you look at what has happened in 47 years, I think that inquisitiveness, strategic, open-minded, curiosity, I think is clearly very apparent. World's tallest building, the palm, the vision, and how high a bar that is set here. And there's only some data that we started to discover in the past few weeks as we started to get big enough data sets, but we found that very fascinating, and it's something that we clearly see. I don't know if that's something that you see in the workplace as well, Dr. Alia, but high inquisitive, much higher than the global average.
Yeah, Saleh Nasr من NAS Consultancy Company. I think for nationals, as you said, they are the same talent like any other nations. The challenge is because they are minority in the workplace, as Dr. Alia said. The challenge is how to manage their expectations, to understand that yes, we want to get more experience and build competency, and not only going for a higher position and managing people. I think this is the question, because they have this expectation, being a national, I have to move up. And that's the question, how to manage that.
I think it's a question that we all tend to ask ourselves always, how to manage expectations of young Emiratis who come to the workplace. And at the moment, we haven't found a solution. I believe in setting the expectations clearly. And many times I tell individuals, especially our young graduates, when they come in with no experience, and in a year or 18 months, we expect them to have a role as a specialist. And that's what I always emphasize, that they are privileged to be in that situation. They are fresh graduates. In a year's time, they will be holding a role that someone else will have 6 years experience on. So they really need to pull up their socks, they need to excel, and they need to prove themselves. And maybe that's where in the Hogan you will see the results that are a little bit higher, because we try to push our young Emiratis to reach a certain level of expertise, basically, at a young age. So it is still a challenge, which we haven't found a formula yet, but it's about setting expectations from the beginning, I think.
Okay, so then our final question of the panel. Technology companies are developing and promoting more and more artificial intelligence, AI capabilities to help HR professionals track data, to address talent issues such as employee engagement, turnover, and absenteeism. What's your view about today's digital disruption, and how should HR manage this?
Let's start with HR before we go to IT.
That's a big question.
So you're allowed a moment, don't worry. Okay.
Pardon?
You're allowed a moment to think about it, don't worry.
I need more than a moment, but anyway, we're working, obviously, it's the age of not just artificial intelligence, but also data analytics. So now we're trying to embrace data and trying to make better decisions based on what our employees tell us. So when it comes to engagement, turnover, absenteeism, I think it's about understanding the cause behind all these areas. Engagement, I think that needs to be taken with a pinch of salt as well, because it's a survey, it's a questionnaire, and again, in this part of the world, people tend to prefer to give better, more positive feedback. So I think at the end, it's about engagement, the pulse of the organization. Can you see the engaged behaviors, not just what comes up on paper? Turnover, it's understanding the reasons behind it. So yeah, you will have the figures around it, you'll have the numbers, but what is the real cause? Is it linked to engagement? Is it linked to opportunities within the country? Are there any areas of growth happening around that your talent is going to it? And absenteeism, what is the cause? And is it absenteeism, or now with the new trend on presenteeism, which is even more dangerous? So I think it's utilizing the information and the data to be able to make better judgment, but again, using your common sense, not just going with what you see with data analytics and making assumptions that don't exist. That's how I would look at how data is being used. Digital disruption, my views on digital disruption. I think it's about embracing it. The world is moving towards the digitalization. Now I'm in the process at looking at digital learning. So it's about embracing it and using the disruption in a meaningful way that will help our colleagues across any organization better manage themselves. So for example, now we're talking about working from home. We can use digitalization to actually capture information, have virtual meetings. It's about utilizing it for the best of the individual and the organization, I think, at the end of the day. So that's how I would answer this question.
Thank you.
I think from our perspective, things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, they're great tools when used appropriately. However, you see case after case where people have tried to use machine learning, for example, to replicate candidates, to find the best candidates. And what they forget is every time the machine learns, based on who it's learning from, it's introducing systematic bias. And so the notion that an AI or a machine learning-based intervention is going to increase inclusiveness or reduce bias is just false. And you have to look no further than Google pulling out all of their employment algorithms because they realized very quickly they were quite discriminatory against different groups of people globally that they were actually trying to attract and retain in the organization. Second, the notion of digital disruption, I don't think it's any different than when Henry Ford rolled out the Model T. We have these tools, we have this information, I love how you put it. We can look at the data all the time, and now we can look at so much more data in a much easier way, but we have to have common sense. And you have to apply the logic of the business to the data that you now have at your fingertips, where 3 years ago it took you a month to get that report run. Now you can do it on demand. But how are you using that information, and is it becoming distracting? And I think, at least in a lot of businesses I see, the amount of data people have access to, now they spend more time trying to figure out what it means than actually engaging in their job and working with the customers. And I think, so from that perspective, it's just pulling back some, perhaps.
Just to finish from the digital side, I think it's striking the right balance of what technology can replace. So there are two things for me. One is, how do we empower the talent management and the HR departments to really focus on what's important and take that administration out? There are so many, you can name it, either from automation of systems or chatbots to answer basic questions. You can deploy that and free their time to work on the next talent that is required, talent management programs and the right strategies to drive the strategy for the company. The second thing is, we talked a lot about data, and I think data is only growing, is being able to mine that data. And I think today, with the technology that we have, there are a lot of possibilities to identify trends, to find correlations, so predict even sometimes. But it should not stop there. You need the human intervention to go dig deeper, have the one-on-one conversations, try to understand, have the right assessments in place, and so on, to make sense of it. So it's making sense of it. And on the other side, it's also the right workplaces. Digital has played a great role in reducing, or I would say simulating, as face-to-face through video conferencing, because today the world is virtual. Multinationals, you cannot travel everywhere. So yeah, it's really striking the right balance.
Thank you. Any questions? Jörg?
Good morning. My name is Jörg. I work for Minor Hotels. In my role, I oversee close to 50 business units and guide and coach their HR teams. So if I look at digital disruption, I'm hopeful that digital disruption will help us to reduce the work that creates less impact. For example, we spend a great amount of time to interview those people that we will not hire. And I feel we probably don't spend enough time on the people that we should hire. My question is, what are you doing in your companies today to use AI or any digital means? And in particular to Hogan, how is Hogan going to help us with this task, whether in recruitment or other, in the future?
So we have started using AI as part of the screening process. We have a lot of candidates who apply for many jobs. So we already have, it's a platform on the webpage. They have to answer certain questions. There's the algorithms behind it. And the scoring helps the recruiter understand whether this is someone that is a better fit or not. And once they've done their own screening, then they spend the time on the individuals who supposedly matter, through the CVs, through the double checking. At the moment, I wouldn't say that the processes were, I'll be honest, I won't say it's working brilliantly, but at least it's guiding the recruiter into the right direction. We definitely know the ones that we don't want to consider because they're not meeting basic requirements. And it's about spending more time at the top ones that, from a system perspective, they recommend those individuals can do the roles. Now, for Hogan, we tend to use it for executives. We feel it adds a lot of value because that's where we spend more time. We don't spend time with the more junior roles that is more automated. With the seniors, that's where we spend time understanding the profile, giving them feedback. So that's how we tend to use Hogan in our organization, and that's how it's helping us understand as well whether a person will be not a better fit, it's understanding how they would be able to fit in our organization, understanding as well how the line manager could work with an individual and identifying their developmental areas so that when an individual comes on board, we already can support them from the beginning, understanding their derailers or their darker side and manage it better. That's how we use it.
So in PepsiCo, we have done actually trials of, we definitely use AI in screening, CVs and so on, but we also did a pilot, I think in Russia, for interviewing, but certain level of workforce, so lower level, I would say, blue collar, which was very successful, still in the trial phase. I would say Hogan, we use it mostly for development purposes, so we don't use it for recruitment per se. But we start for certain executives, yes, definitely from a certain level, to try to do it as early as possible so that we can support them in their development throughout their career. Yeah.
And for us, from an assessment perspective, we've been using machine learning for years, and that's around the volume of data that we have come into the system, and then how do you make smart, intelligent decisions or inferences from those data. Specifically with clients, we're having a lot of, I'll just call it fun, helping organizations determine how do you best identify quickly and then track people's progress through your the selection processes, or from a development standpoint, we have organizations that are using AI to really detail the assessment center team and or the development coaches on where's the critical factors to focus on. If you have all these dimensions of broad personality, what's key for this individual? We constantly have different groups that we're working with around around these innovative topics. I think long term, it'll also be really beneficial and a major impact for us as we start talking about the output. So what information do you share? What information do you provide and display for an individual based on everything you know about them? And so using that to guide more of the development discussion from an automated perspective to be able to push down in organizations where they don't have the time or the budget to be so high touch with the one-on-ones.
Fantastic. Alia, Delel, Ryan, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts today. Please everyone join me in thanking them for all their input for the past hour. Thank you very much to our panel.